I pray for you to get started. Heavenly Father, I want to thank you for my Pepe. I pray that you would speak through him. I pray that you would use his words and the words of his story, the pain that he's gone through, as well as the story of others in the Bible who've gone through pain. Use those things for your honor and glory to show us something new about you. Amen.
Hey guys, so for those of you who don't know me, my name is Jose, but no one ever calls me that. My name is Pepe. So today we're going to continue on our series talking about chaos and suffering. And what a time to be talking about this, right? This year 2020 has brought suffering like I don't think I've seen this much suffering in any of the other years before. We've seen some crazy stuff. We've had so many hurricanes this year. We've seen riots. We have seen businesses go bankrupt. Sears went bankrupt, y'all. That thing has been there since I was a kid. We've also even seen murder hornets. Those came out of nowhere and they disappeared as well. And that I don't know what makes me more scared, the fact that they were there or now that we don't know where they're at. And of course, who could forget about COVID? COVID has come and changed this year in such a drastic way. What was normal before now feels like a distant memory. And then on top of all of these things, I'm pretty sure each and every one of you have your own sufferings that you go through day in and day out, on top of all the craziness and chaos that's this year. This year just seems like it doesn't stop giving us problems. Last week, Nathan talked about a man named Paul, someone who went from a life of riches and chose to a life of suffering to pursue God. And today, I want to talk to you about another man from the Bible. His name is Job. See, Job didn't get to choose just like Paul did. He was already a faithful man of God. And he was rich. And I mean like Elon Musk rich. He had so much money, y'all. And not only that, but he was a man of great integrity. He was a great father, and he had a healthy fear of the Lord. He knew the Lord's heart, and he went after it. But then all of that suddenly changed, and Job experienced what was 2020 in a span of a week. When I think about that, I think of how crazy that is, and how I don't think I could have bear that. So let's talk about Job. This all started one day when Satan went up to God, and Satan was just like, "Hey God, I've been going around the world, and I've just been looking around." And God says, "Have you seen my servant Job? He loves me, he fears me, and he's a faithful servant. He is blameless." The Bible goes as far as to call him blameless. And Satan is like, "Well, of course he's like that. You have given him everything. You have given him riches. You have given him a big family. How can he not love you?" And God says, "You know what? You can take what you want from him, just don't hurt him." And so Satan one day goes, and there's a huge burst of wind, and it tears down his sons and daughters' houses, and they all die. Not only that, but then robbers come, and they take away his cattle. They take away his belongings. He is left penniless. He's left without his sons and daughters. And in this suffering, he tears his clothes off, shaves his head. And if I would have been in his position, I would have just been mad. I would have been bitter. But he goes and he prays to God. And so later on, Satan goes back to God and is like, "Hey God, I've still been looking around the world." And God says, "Did you look at my servant Job? You took everything away from him, and yet he still loves me. He refused to curse my name." And Satan says, "Well, of course, you didn't let me hurt him. If I take away his health, then he would curse you." And God says, "Fine, you can hurt him, just don't kill him." And so Satan causes Job to develop these boils from the crown of his head to the soles of his feet. In fact, I think we even have a picture of what that looked like. That's not what I was expecting. But from a show of hands really quickly, who knows where that's from? All right, I'm not that old. Okay, no, but in reality, I do have a picture of what more or less this would look like. that. If y'all have seen Dr. Pimple Popper, you more or less have an idea. Now imagine, already one of those is painful enough, but he had it from the tip of his head to the soles of his feet. That means that he couldn't even walk. He couldn't even sit or lay down without one of these things touching something and him being in pain. It would be like getting stung by the murder hornets and then feeling like he has COVID at the same time and not getting to die. And so Job suffers even more. And throughout all of this, he refuses to blame God. He refuses to put the name of God down. His wife is even like, Job, just curse God and die. Like, it's that easy, right? And Job says, no. Shall we only take what's good for him? No. Job knew that there was more to this. At the time, he knew there was more to this. And in his suffering, he went and he just laid down and cried. While he was crying, several of his friends came by and they sat with him. They sat with him for 7 days just crying, just being there with him. And at this point, when I'm reading this, I'm thinking, these are some amazing friends. Who goes and sits with someone just crying for 7 days, just being there for him? Do y'all have some friends like that? That from the moment that you start suffering, they're there for you? See, at this point of the story, I'm like, even when Job has lost everything, he still has something there. And then this story takes a little bit of a twist. After the 7 days, Job speaks for the first time. And the words that come out of his mouth is, God, why don't you kill me? God, why was I born? Why did it even bother me? Why was I even bothered to be alive? Like, why did you let me live? Why did you give me breath? Why couldn't I have just died in the womb? And in these passages, you see how much Job was hurting. You get to hear the anguish in his voice. You get to imagine just how much pain he's feeling. That he just wants to die already. In fact, he not just only wants to die, he wishes he never got here in the first place. And then, after he's finished speaking, immediately one of his friends speaks and says, Job, you're a great guy. But this is obviously happening to you because you've sinned and you refuse to admit it. So in reality, you're in this place because it's your fault. And at this point, I'm like, whoa, what? What kind of friend is this? Here I am pouring out my heart, my pains, and immediately this friend of mine goes, oh, no. See, all of this is your fault. Have y'all ever had a friend like that? When you were hurting, you wanted to just vent to them, and instead they made you feel worse. See, I've been where Job has been. There's been times in my life where I've just felt like giving up, and I was like, God, why don't you just take me? Why don't you just kill me right now? Why doesn't the rapture happen right now? And we can just ignore all of this and leave it behind. This continues on. Job continues to complain and then argue against his friends for about 10 exchanges. This goes back and forth. And then suddenly, everyone stays quiet. Job finished talking. His other friends finished talking. No one knew what to say anymore. And then this happened in an exchange between Job and 3 friends. Then a 4th friend had been there, just waiting, listening to both sides. And after everyone was done, he decided to speak. And the first thing he does is he goes up to Job and empathizes with him. He says, Job, I am human like you are. I was made from clay. Just like you, I am a man and I have feelings, and you have no reason to fear me. I just want you to go ahead and listen to me, and if you have something to say, I will be quiet and listen to you. But allow me to speak. And so Job didn't say anything. And so this 4th friend starts talking. And he says he's mad. He's mad because of how Job is reacting. Job kept complaining. He kept saying, I am blameless, and so but God still made an enemy out of me. I don't know why, but God must make an enemy out of me because I am suffering right now. And then he's mad at the other friends because they're making God seem like if we sin once, God takes everything away from us. Like if he's a cruel father that just says, oh, you know what? You got a D on your test. Goodbye to everything. And this fourth friend, he's angry. He's angry at both sides. But he's talking to Job in a way with compassion. Every time he finishes saying a statement, he waits to see if Job has a response. And if he doesn't, he continues on going. And every time he says, Job, listen to me. Job, I'm here. Job, I'm speaking to you not because I'm angry with you, not because I'm saying that this is on you, but because I want you to understand that this is how it works. See, Job was in a place of suffering. He lost everything. He didn't know what to do. He felt alone. And then having friends that are telling him like, hey, this is your fault, didn't really help. The way the fourth friend reacts reminded me a lot of the verse in James 1:19. It says, understand this, my dear brothers and sisters. You must all be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry. Human anger does not produce righteousness, the righteousness God desires. See, this reminds me of this for several reasons. This fourth friend, he was there the whole time, but he listened. He listened to both sides. He probably got angry from the first response, but he refused to say anything until everyone else had said their piece. And then he chose to speak. And he didn't speak out of anger. He was angry, but he spoke because he cared about Job. He loved Job, and he loved God. That's why he chose to speak. And then, after the fourth friend finishes speaking, the unthinkable happens. God speaks to Job directly. And God starts asking Job all of these questions and just saying, Job, do you know this? Did you set the waters where they're at? Did you set the stars in the sky? Have you ever seen a deer give birth in the wild? Do you know when a goat will be born? He starts asking all these questions that Job wouldn't have an answer to. He's trying to make Job understand that we're not always going to understand our sufferings. When I was listening to this, I felt bad for Job. I felt bad because in that moment, Job realized where he had overstepped his suffering. As I was reading this, it reminded me of a time in my life last year. Last year, around March or April, I entered an episode of depression. This was caused because I had an argument with my mom, and in the middle of this argument, I kept trying to defend my side. She kept trying to defend her side, and we weren't listening to each other. Until at one point, my mom says, I feel like I'm failing as a mother. This shook me. And in order for her not to feel bad, I said, no, Mom, if anything, I'm failing you as a son. Now, this at first, I didn't think this affected me. But for the following days, I didn't feel right. Every time I would wake up, I would want just to go back to sleep. I wouldn't eat. Whenever I was around people, I felt like I didn't belong. Whenever I would come to church, I would feel like no one cared. And it's crazy because I know this is a home where everyone loves me. I would come to Aftershock, a place that usually gives me joy, lifts up my spirits, even no matter how the week is going, and I could feel nothing. Eventually, I came to realize that I had developed depression. And so, I said, let me fix it. On my own. I don't need anyone's help. I'm going to do this on my own. But what did I do? I did nothing. I would stay in my room. Every time I would be invited with friends, I would be there for like about 10 minutes, and then I would go back home and I'd be like, oh no, they didn't want me there. And I would just stay there in my suffering. And this kept going day in and day out, and nothing would change. The only thing that I noticed was that I kept getting further away from God and further away from those people that loved me. While reading the story, I realized that this story gives us an idea of what not to do when we're suffering. We shouldn't stay there. We shouldn't reject help. We shouldn't reject God. And so I came up with the 3 G's. The first G being get up. When we're down, when we're suffering, we shouldn't stay there, guys. As much as we want to, and I know how much we want to. I was there. I would say, I need to go to church. But you know what sounds better? Staying in my bed. And that's all I would do. I wouldn't do anything. I would just stay there and I would think about how sad I was, how much people probably didn't care about me. And meanwhile, I had people texting me, hey, where are you? And I'd be like, oh, no one cares. My life's a mess. I'm a horrible son. I'm a horrible leader. That's where I was. Eventually, I realized that after going to CR1s, was that I couldn't keep doing this. I couldn't just keep staying in my room in my own self-pity, expecting things to change. And this is where it gets really bad, guys. Then I knew what I needed to do, but I refused to do it. People would come up to me and I'd be like, yeah, no, I'm good. I'm good. I'm dealing with it. And I would go home and nothing would change. So guys, when you're stuck in that place, it's important to get up. And I mean, get up in any way that you can. Go to church. Go out for a walk. Get up and do something different. Clean your room. Do something that will get you out of that headspace. In the story of Job, we see how Job just sat there for 7 days crying. And while it's okay to mourn and it's okay to suffer and it's okay to do this, we can't stay there. Because otherwise, if we keep staying there, the only thing that we do is let the suffering grow more and more, and it eats us from the inside out. We become bitter and we become angry. The second G is to get help. See, Job got help. He first had friends that went to him. But these few friends, well, they had good intentions at first, and they said, we're going to be there for Job. We're going to do this. We're going to do this all together, guys, right? They had good intentions at first. They went up to Job, and they wanted to be there for Job. They wanted to be able to be there and comfort him. And a lot of times in our lives, guys, we're going to have that where people are going to come into our lives, and they're going to want to help us. But it doesn't always work the same way. How many of you have had friends that when you pour out their heart to them, you pour out your heart to them, they say something, and then you're like, that's not what I wanted to hear right now. That's not what I needed to hear. I want you to be there for me. I don't want you to tell me how I got myself into this mess. I just want to be heard. See, through all of these things, I had people reaching out. When I was going through my depression, I had people reaching out to help me. And I refused to accept the help because I believed that I could do it on my own. That is until one night during a leaders meeting for Aftershock. I was sitting in the leaders meeting and I was doing fine. We were having fun. We were discussing things for Aftershock. We were having all these future plans that were exciting. And then during the middle of the meeting, while we took a break for dessert, there was a little voice in me that said, no one here loves you. You could leave out that door right now and no one would care. You should just go home because in reality, you're not doing anything here. And in my suffering, because I didn't know what else to do, I listened to that voice and I was like, you know what, you're right. I'm gonna leave. I said goodbye to everyone and I was about to leave when Ms. Walter said, let me walk you out. Guys, I'm 100% convinced that Ms. Walter had no plans in letting me even get near my car. We didn't even get to the driveway. We were in a little walkway going to the driveway when she said, Pepe, what's wrong? Are you feeling okay? And my usual reaction of being, oh no, I'm fine, shattered. And I remember that one moment I was about to say, oh, I'm okay, and the next thing I know is that I'm crying in Ms. Walter's arms. And I was telling her what was hurting me. I remember telling her all of these different things. And then suddenly I was back inside the house. And then I have people praying for me. And then the leaders meeting ends, and it turns out that we ended up splitting into two groups, the guys and the girls. And it turns out that a lot of hurting was going on that night. And after that, that's when I realized that I couldn't do this on my own. I started being open in my open shares and CR. I started staying for CRs instead of leaving after worship. I started forcing myself to be able to be back here in Aftershock, because even here, I would be here, but I wouldn't be here. Guys, I want to talk to you for a second and just get really real with both guys and the girls. Depression is a very real thing. It is a medical condition. It is a chemical imbalance in your brain. We need to get help. And I don't mean just help from your friends or your family or your loved ones. If you need to, go get medical help. I didn't get to that point. But some of us need to, and there's no shame in that. Just like when we're sick, we need to go to the doctor. 2 weeks ago, I got sick, randomly, stomach sick, and immediately rushed to the hospital, not to the hospital, to the doctor. And how come I could do that for a stomach sickness, but when I knew that I was depressed, I couldn't do that? There's no shame in being depressed. Depression is a very real thing. And I want everyone to understand that, because especially down here in the Hispanic community, a lot of people don't believe that depression is a real thing. The third thing I want to talk to you guys, the third G that I want to talk to you guys about is get God. See, a lot of these things could have happened, but had I not clinged on to God after that talk with Ms. Walter, I don't think I would have gotten far. I think that I would still be stuck there trying to figure it out all on my own and being like, okay, why did this happen? How did I get myself into this mess? Where are the points that I can fix? Last week, we were meeting with our small group and we were talking over Proverbs. And this verse jumped out at me. And this is a very popular verse. And that's Proverbs 3:5-6. Trust in the Lord your God with all your heart. Do not depend on your own understanding. Seek his will in all you do, and he will show you which path to take. And that's a very key thing, guys. We shouldn't depend on our own understanding. When we're suffering, we don't always get to know why we're suffering in the first place. Sometimes we get to find out, sometimes we don't. But we shouldn't dwell in it. That was the main problem Job had. He kept dwelling, trying to figure out his suffering on his own. He kept saying, oh, God made an enemy out of me. Oh, I don't know why I'm suffering, but I know why I'm suffering, and I shouldn't be suffering because I'm blameless. He kept trying to make sense of this thing. He kept looking at this little picture, trying to fix it, but he kept ignoring the bigger things outside. He kept ignoring the people that were trying to help him. They weren't doing a great job, but he kept ignoring them. See, but then the verse that really jumped out at me was Proverbs 3:7. Don't be impressed with your own wisdom. Instead, fear the Lord and turn away from evil. Oftentimes, whenever we're suffering, or even when we're not suffering, and we do something great, we're impressed with our own wisdom. I'm like, I did this. I know this. I lived this my whole high school life. Every little thing I did, I thought I was a genius. It was like, 1 + 1 = 2. Did it all on my own. But guys, we shouldn't be impressed in our own wisdom. The wisdom that we have is given to us by God. On top of this, suffering is not always bad. Yes, it feels bad at the moment, and it's bad, and it sucks to go through it. But God uses this suffering to grow us, to make sure that we're able to, either he catches our attention on something, or he puts this thing in our path so we can use it later in a good way. In Job 36:15, it says, but by means of their suffering, he rescues those who suffers, for he gets their attention through adversity. See, had this fight with my mom not happened, I wouldn't know how much I was hurting her. Well, I don't think I'm a bad son. I don't do anything really bad, but I was neglecting my home life. I would neglect my mom's needs. She would need help around the house, and I would make everything else a priority but that. And my mom would suffer. My mom works a lot, and I would turn a blind eye to this and like, oh no, she's got it. God called me out. But not only, he could have done that just with the argument alone. But then later on, I realized why I had to go through the depression. A couple months after I got over my depression, one of the students in my small group ended up going into depression. Had I dealt with this before the depression, I wouldn't have known how to handle it. I probably would have been like Job's first 3 friends and been like, oh, it's okay, just get over it. You can do it. Just stop being sad. But I knew that it wasn't that easy. I knew that sometimes you just can't get up that morning. There's some mornings where you just feel defeated. Had I not gone through this, I wouldn't have known how to tackle this. But instead, I was able to walk with him. I was able to be there for him the way he needed to be. I understood his pain. I understood what needed to be done. Another verse that we see here on Job is Job 36:21, and that's, be on guard, turn back from evil, for God sent the suffering to keep you from a life of evil. Guys, suffering sometimes happens to stop us from doing something. God catches our attention, like, hey, I'm going to put this little suffering in front of you to keep you from the bigger path of way. Because if you keep going down this road, it's going to lead to your destruction. I have friends that I've seen in my life throughout the years, from people that I knew back in elementary, who took a wrong turn at one point. And God repeatedly put things in their lives, things that would cause them to be like, hey, pay attention. I'm trying to reach you before you reach a dead end. Some of them listened, and unfortunately some of them didn't. And some of them are in a place where I wish they would never see that place. For the ones that listened, they're doing a lot better. See, but the story of Job just doesn't end with suffering. At the end, after God talks to Job, Job repents. He says, God, I'm sorry. I don't know everything. I can't understand everything. And upon doing that, God restores Job. He just doesn't restore Job, but he doubles everything he had. Everything that he lost, he doubled it. He gained so many more sons and grandchildren, and he lived to be 140 years old. Every time we suffer, guys, that suffering is not in vain. God makes something out of that suffering. And I want you to be aware of this. Suffering is not always bad, but it's a time for us to grow. Yes, it's bad. It feels bad. It sucks. I've been there. And most of our leaders have been there. In fact, all of our leaders have been there. I don't think there's a leader here who has not suffered. Guys, had I not followed the 3 Gs, wherever they're at right now, I don't know where it would have been. Granted, I didn't do the first one really good, and the second one had to be handed to me. And then after that, I was like, oh, you know what? Who I need? I need God. But I realized that these 3 things are very important. Without those 3 things, I don't know where I would have been right now. But as for right now, I'm able to say that in November 12th, I will be 1 year free of depression. And it's all thanks to God. Yes, I did go through suffering. I did go through a time of depression. But God still helped me through it there. He didn't leave me alone. He was there every single step of the way guiding me, whether I could see it or not. And I know that sometimes it feels like he's not there. But I want you guys to remember that there's always someone there. God is there. Your leaders are here. Your friends are here. Your family's here. Whenever you guys are going through suffering, don't think you're alone. I want to pray with you. Dear Lord, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for all the things that you do. I want to thank you for all the good and all the bad. Yes, suffering does come in our lives, but you don't leave us behind. You're there every single step of the way, even when we can't see it, even when we can't feel it, you're there. You put people in our lives to help build us up, and to show us that we're loved. Lord, this year of 2020 has been a tough year. People have lost family members. Some people have lost their jobs. Some people just don't know how to deal with this year anymore. But I know that you're going to do something great. No suffering comes unrewarded. This time is going to be a time for growth. And I don't mean just individual growth. I feel like this is going to be a great spiritual growth in our nation. Lord, a lot of us Job suffered through a lot, but he never lost his faith in you. And the same way, I wish this for each and every one of these students, that when they're faced with suffering, they don't just refuse to give up. Allow them to get back up, to get out of that place of suffering, to get the help that they need, and to get you, Lord, to cling on to you and say, Dad, I'm not going to leave you. Dad, help me. Don't help me understand, but help me understand with your timing. Maybe I don't need to know why I'm suffering right now, but I know that eventually you're going to make something good out of this. Lord, I lift these things up in your name, in the name of your Son, Jesus, who came and died on the cross for our sins because he loved us. In your name I pray, amen.